Did you realize that the Carolinas is home to one of the most intense barbecue battles in the United States? And we're not talking about brisket and ribs, we're talking about sauces. 2 sauces to be exact. That's that sharp, spicy vinegar-based sauce out of North Carolina, and that tangy, golden mustard-based sauce out of South Carolina. But how do these 2 distinct styles come to be? Well, today we're gonna find out because we're doing a deep dive into the divide. This is Fork and Embers, and I'm Joe. And this is my series, Barbecue Passport. In this series, what I like to do is we take a deep dive into different regions throughout the world, and we look at their history, their barbecue, try to figure out how it came to be what it is today, and we get to have some fun and try to recreate it.
And let's see what you made. Nailed it!
Today, we're talking about one of the oldest barbecue rivalries in the United States. And while I do acknowledge that the Carolinas is made up of a lot of different barbecue styles, specifically in their sauces, we're gonna be talking about the 2 oldest and most culturally entrenched sauces, and that's the vinegar-based North Carolina sauce out of East North Carolina, and then that tangy mustard-based sauce in the Midlands of South Carolina. Every other sauce style came from these sauces. Today, we're gonna break the evolution of these 2 sauces down over a sort of timeline. Today, we're gonna find out where they came from, and more importantly, which one tastes better. Let's go. So we're gonna start in the early colonial era. That would be 1600s to the early 1700s. During this time, a lot of your early European settlers were largely English. And as they started to create settlements throughout the Carolinas, specifically North Carolina, they started to adopt a cooking technique from the indigenous people, specifically the Algonquins. I hope that's how you say it. I looked it up, so I'm sorry if I butchered the name. But this cooking style that they were picking up was called barbacoa. So this cooking technique they were using was cooking over open flame or coal using a wooded structure. Now the English already had a preference for using vinegar as a preservative and as a flavor enhancer. So as they started doing these longer cooks on barbacoa, they naturally started basting it with vinegar. It worked great because it kept the meat moist and it really balanced out the richness and fattiness of the pork. It also happened to be super accessible, very cheap, so it was kind of a match made in heaven with the barbacoa style and then the vinegar basting. Additionally, at this time, we were seeing African slaves being brought over to the Carolinas in increasing numbers. A lot of the times, the enslaved people were tasked with doing a lot of the cooking, and they brought with them something called African pit cooking. I think the technical term would actually be bray, but it wasn't that different from barbacoa style. They were cooking over an open flame with a structure that was lifted, so it was very similar to what the indigenous people here were already doing. So with the mixture of the African pit cooking techniques, the influence of the native tribes, and then the English's preference for vinegar, you really were seeing the earliest makeups of the vinegar-based barbecue style of North Carolina. Now, by the mid-1700s, barbecue really was becoming more of a social institution and less of a necessity. You had political rallies, you had church gatherings, and you had community events. Essentially, if there was an event, barbecue was the main attraction. That's why people went. And it was at this time that East North Carolina really solidified its reputation as vinegar-based barbecue. A lot of the large-scale events at the time, you would see a whole hog being roasted over a pit, and they'd be basting it with vinegar sauce. And at this time, they were starting to add simple seasonings like salt and pepper, and sometimes even lemon and butter for a little kick of extra flavor. And it really gave it a sharp, spicy flavor to the meat. Meanwhile, in South Carolina, something a little different was happening. In the 1730s and 1740s, South Carolina started recruiting German and Swiss German immigrants by the thousands. They did this by offering land grants and cash incentives. And the reason that they wanted to do this is because those immigrants were known for agriculture. And they needed people to colonize and develop the interior of South Carolina, which would eventually become known as the Midlands. So in German cuisine, they actually used mustard quite a bit, specifically on pork dishes. So as they started to pick up the barbacoa style and cooking over open flames, it was pretty natural for them to eventually start using mustard in their sauces. And eventually you would have the combination of mustard, vinegar, as it was a staple at the time in the Carolinas, salt, and sometimes even sugar and honey. And you'd have this unique flavor that you don't find anywhere else. It would eventually become known as Carolina Gold, and over the next few decades, it would become a defining feature of the Midlands of South Carolina. So now we're moving from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. So as the Carolinas grew, naturally the barbecue continued to evolve. And North Carolina specifically saw a massive concentration of whole hog barbecue. And they were still using the vinegar-based sauce to baste it, so it's part of the cooking process, but now you're seeing them serve it as a condiment on the side afterwards. So if you were at one of these large-scale events during this time, you'd see a whole hog being cooked over an open flame, and they'd be basting it with this vinegar-based sauce. So now barbecue is becoming synonymous with these large group gatherings. And it's now where the flavor profile of vinegar-based barbecue is deeply rooted in the local culture in East North Carolina. And the people doing pretty much all of the cooking at these events were very skilled African-American pitmasters. Now, before I go further, I do want to be clear that the influence of the African-American pitmaster on the evolution of barbecue, specifically in Carolinas, but really throughout the South and the rest of the country, it can't be overstated. Starting from the West Africa cooking techniques to perfecting the whole hog. That's why I'm going to have a separate video where I actually do a deep dive into the pivotal role that the African-American pitmaster played on the evolution of barbecue. Because I do believe that their legacy deserves more than just a footnote in this video. So you can look forward to that. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss that. So in South Carolina at this time, mustard-based sauce was still very prominent in the Midlands, and that's where most of the stronghold of Carolina Gold was. But now you're starting to see variations of other sauces throughout South Carolina. So in the Low Country, in the PD region, they're leaning heavier into the vinegar-based sauce that's coming out of East North Carolina, but with slight variations. So now that brings us to the commercialization era, which is 1910 to 1950s. In the earliest 20th century, Carolina specifically saw a massive commercialization of barbecue. In 1919, a man named Sid Weaver and another man named Jess Weisgood, they decided to team up and start opening the earliest barbecue stands in Lexington. Now, the style of barbecue that they bring is very similar to the original vinegar-based North Carolina sauce, but now they're adding tomato or ketchup, and it's becoming a little sweeter, it's a little bit more red, and slightly thicker. In South Carolina, you have the Bessinger family, specifically Joseph Big Joe Bessinger. Now, he really starts to popularize the mustard-based sauce. He opens up a barbecue restaurant in Holly Hill, and he calls it Joe's Diner, and his mustard-based sauce gained a lot of popularity. And his sons, specifically Maurice Bessinger, he aggressively promotes the mustard-based sauces as Carolina Gold. And he actually opens up his own chain of barbecue restaurants called the Piggy Park in the 1950s. So now you're starting to see people opening up barbecue restaurants, and it's went from people's backyards and community events to now being commercialized and gaining a lot more exposure to people outside of just that specific area. And if you open a barbecue restaurant up in the Carolinas, you're going to be harshly judged based off the style of barbecue you're cooking. It's just how it is in those areas. So now we're in the modern era, which is 1950s to where we stand today. Now we're seeing a lot of barbecue festivals, a lot of tourism marketing, and all of this extra media exposure, you know, YouTube, people like me doing videos, articles, has only created more of a divide in these sauces. The mustard and vinegar-based sauce rivalry has really reached the pinnacle. Now we can move on to testing it out. All right, so now that we know more about the sauces, let's bring them to life. The way we're gonna do that is we're gonna take this Boston butt, I've had the bone removed, we're gonna cut it in half, and we're gonna simply season them with salt and pepper. Then I'm gonna smoke it over hickory wood, which would have been local at the time. They probably continue to use hickory wood now. That's what we use here in Kentucky. And we pretty much have the same tree, so. With one of the Boston butts, we're gonna be basting it with that Eastern North Carolina sauce. And then with the other one, it doesn't get any special treatment until it comes off the smoker, and we're gonna serve it up with that Carolina Gold sauce. So let me prep this, get this on the smoker, and I'll show you how we make those sauces. All right, guys, we're gonna start with Eastern North Carolina barbecue. It's probably the simplest barbecue sauce I've ever made. It comes out of Holy Smoke, the big book of North Carolina barbecue. All you need is 4 cups of apple cider vinegar, 1 more cup should do, and that's gonna put us pretty close to the top of this thing. Alrighty, so next what you need is your seasonings, and there's really only 3 seasonings that we're using. We got 1/3 cup of crushed red pepper. That's pretty hot, but that's what the recipe calls for. Some people actually even add more. There's also about a 1/2 tablespoon of black pepper in here and 1 tablespoon of salt. Pour that in there. And that's it. Shake it up. And you now have some Eastern North Carolina barbecue sauce. And we're gonna base that pork shoulder with this, and then we're gonna finish it off at the end with a little bit of it. I know that this shit's gonna be hot. So now let's move on to the mustard-based sauce. So this one already loses a few points because it required me to break out my burner. It also has about 4 or 5 times the ingredients. So I did some research on the intranet, and this was considered the most authentic. It had the most likes, the most views. If you feel differently and you're from South Carolina, go ahead and enlighten us, because I'm just a poor old Kentucky boy following things I see on the internet. So, what we need to start with is mustard, right? We know it's a mustard-based sauce, so no shit. So we're gonna do 1.5 cups of mustard. What a sight. Jesus. There we go. 1.5 cups. Alrighty. This recipe calls for some honey. It actually has quite a bit of sugar in it, so we might actually use most of this damn thing. Jesus Christ, come on. I didn't even need to dirty this thing, did I? Could have just poured it straight in there. We put that in there. Beautiful. We got about 1/2 cup of brown sugar. A lot of sugar, man. Next, believe it or not, a little ode to that Lexington style barbecue, we're gonna do some ketchup. And that calls for 1/4 cup. Next, we got about 4 teaspoons of W sauce. That's also known as Worcestershire.
Worcester sauce.
1, 2, 3, 4. Come on now. You know I ain't got no teaspoon out here. But that was close. Next, we're gonna go in with the seasonings, okay? So I've got 2 teaspoons of garlic powder here. I got a pinch of cayenne to add a little bit of heat, 1 teaspoon of salt, and that's it. Well, we got one more thing to add in here. I know, right? A lot of ingredients. This shit better be delicious, because I mixed that other stuff up in a matter of no time. Now look here. Don't come at me. I didn't make this recipe. It's calling for a little bit of hot sauce. I got Louisiana hot sauce, so that's what we're gonna add. We gotta do a dash of that. Beautiful. Next, lo and behold, the vinegar. Let's do 1 cup of that. Add that. There we go. We're going to kick this thing on high, then we're gonna bring it down once it starts simmering, and we're gonna do that for 10 minutes. So mix it up really well, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Alrighty, people. This is where we're at after 10 minutes. Look at that. A little darker than I suspected it would be, but it looks delicious. And we're gonna find out. Okay, so we've got these 2 Boston butts smoked up. And I'm gonna tell you, they look damn good. I just used salt and pepper, but that bark, that's phenomenal. I've had other barks with sugar in it that doesn't look that good. So this Boston butt here had nothing done to it, salt, pepper, smoked it. This one has been basted about every 30 minutes to every hour until it was finished with the vinegar-based sauce. I'm gonna go ahead and shred them, and then we can give them a taste test. Ooh, it's still a little hot, but I'm sick of waiting. Ideally, I'd like to probably rest for a couple hours, but fuck it. Look at that. You know it's too hot when that's happening. All right, so let's go ahead and give the mustard-based sauce a test. Let's get a good piece here. All right, you really taste the mustard, of course, but the brown sugar, very prominent flavor. That brown sugar is strong. But you know what? It kind of tastes like honey mustard. It's got a lot more tangy, acidic flavor, but I say it's like an elevated honey mustard. Let's try a little bit of this. Let me get a clean spoon. This right here, I'm betting it's pretty damn spicy. But I'm guessing it's gonna cut through that pork nicely. Shit, put a lot of pepper on that. You know what? It's hard to say Carolinians. Is it Carolinians? So before I give my verdict, let's kind of talk about some of the drawbacks of each real quick. This one takes too long to make. It's not a big process, but when compared to this, it's a lot more of a process. This right here, I can add 4 ingredients to this jar here, shake it up, and it's done. I also love how spicy it is. If I were to make one of these on a regular basis and use it when I'm smoking, I'd have to go with the North Carolina vinegar-based sauce. I've got to. This sauce here reminds me of Alabama white sauce in the fact that it's a little bit of a weird flavor for some people, putting mustard on their barbecue, unless it's a binder, of course, but that tastes phenomenal, not gonna lie, but it tastes like a really elevated honey mustard. If you don't like honey mustard, you're not gonna like this. For simplicity's sake, I'm gonna deem this the winner. Okay, that concludes Barbecue Passport for the Battle of the Carolinas. Now this is just one man's opinion. Why don't you go ahead and run to the comment section, because I know you're about to, and tell me which one you prefer, or if it's neither of these and you prefer some of the other styles in the Carolinas. But go ahead and hit that subscribe button, notification bell so you don't miss any future videos, and hit that like button.